The morning started like any other Tuesday at the Rocky Mountain Ranch. Jessica had woken up at 5 in the morning, just like she always did. The air was cold and crisp, and she could see her breath forming little clouds as she walked toward the stables. She had been working at this ranch for 3 years now, and she loved every single day of it. There was something special about being around horses that made her feel alive and peaceful at the same time. But this particular morning was about to become one she would never forget for the rest of her life. The night before had been rough. A massive storm had rolled through the valley, bringing thunder that shook the windows and lightning that lit up the sky like fireworks. The rain had come down so hard that it sounded like someone was throwing rocks at the roof. Jessica had stayed up late, checking on the horses in the barn to make sure they weren't too spooked by all the noise and chaos outside. Now, with the storm finally over, she needed to ride along the fence line to check for any damage. Trees could have fallen on the fences, or the wind might have knocked posts loose. It was boring work, but it had to be done. She saddled up her horse, a reliable bay gelding named Ranger, and headed out into the misty morning. The grass was still wet from all the rain, and the whole world seemed quiet and peaceful after the violence of the storm. Birds were starting to sing again, and the sun was trying to break through the gray clouds. Jessica rode slowly, her eyes scanning the fence posts and wire, looking for anything that needed fixing. That's when she saw something that made her pull Ranger to a complete stop. Standing in the tall grass, about 50 yards away from the fence, was a tiny horse, but this wasn't one of the ranch horses that had somehow gotten loose. This was a foal, a baby horse that couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. Its coat was a beautiful chestnut color, shining even in the dim morning light, and it had a white marking on its forehead that looked like a small star. The little thing was just standing there, completely alone, looking lost and scared. Jessica felt her heart skip a beat. She had seen plenty of horses in her life, but there was something about this moment that felt different. Something felt wrong. Where was this baby's mother? Foals this young never wandered around by themselves. They stayed right next to their mothers, nursing and learning how to be horses. She dismounted from Ranger slowly, not wanting to scare the little one. Her boots made soft squishing sounds in the wet grass as she walked forward carefully. She expected the foal to run away at any second. Wild horses were usually terrified of humans, and they would bolt at the first sign of danger. But this foal didn't run. Instead, it did something that completely shocked Jessica. The baby horse took a small, wobbly step toward her, then another step. Its legs looked so thin and uncertain, like it might fall over at any moment. The foal let out a soft whinny, a sound that was both sweet and heartbreaking at the same time. Jessica stopped moving and just stood there, barely breathing. She didn't want to do anything that might frighten this precious little creature. The foal kept coming closer, its big brown eyes locked on her face. Those eyes were full of fear, but also something else. Hope, maybe, or desperation. When the baby horse was finally close enough to touch, Jessica slowly reached out her hand. The foal sniffed her fingers carefully, its soft nose tickling her skin. Then, to her complete amazement, the little horse pressed its body against her leg, just like it would have done with its mother. That's when Jessica's worry really kicked in. This wasn't normal behavior. This foal was acting like this because it was desperate. It was alone, probably for a long time, and it was so scared that it was willing to trust the first living thing that showed it any kindness. Jessica looked around at the surrounding hills and valleys, searching desperately for any sign of an adult horse. Wild mustangs did roam this area sometimes. She had seen them from a distance a few times, beautiful and free, running across the open land, but today there was nothing. No mother mare calling for her baby. No herd anywhere in sight. The foal was thin. She could see its ribs poking through its fuzzy coat. Its eyes had dark circles under them, and its whole body was trembling, though Jessica couldn't tell if that was from cold, hunger, or fear. Maybe all three. "Oh, you poor baby," Jessica whispered softly. "Where's your mama? What happened to you?" The foal just pressed closer to her, as if trying to disappear into her side. It was seeking protection, warmth, safety, all the things its mother should have been providing. Jessica knew she couldn't just leave this baby out here alone. The storm had passed, but the danger hadn't. There were coyotes in these hills. Mountain lions, too. A foal this small and weak wouldn't last another night by itself. It was honestly a miracle that it had survived this long, but she also had a problem. How was she supposed to get this wild baby back to the ranch? She couldn't exactly put it on her horse, and she couldn't carry it. Even though the foal was small, it still probably weighed at least 80 pounds. She decided to try something that seemed crazy, but it was her only option. She would walk back to the ranch and see if the foal would follow her. Jessica grabbed Ranger's reins and started walking slowly back the way she had come. She didn't look back at first, afraid that if she made eye contact, the foal might realize what was happening and run away. But after a few steps, she couldn't help herself. She glanced over her shoulder. The foal was following her. Not just following, but staying right at her heels like a puppy following its owner. Every few steps it would press its nose against her back or her arm, as if making sure she was still there. As if making sure this wasn't a dream and it really had found someone to help it. Jessica felt tears stinging her eyes, but she blinked them away. She needed to focus. The ranch was still 2 miles away, and she needed to get this baby to safety. They walked together through the wet grass, an odd little parade. Ranger, the reliable old ranch horse, seemed to understand something important was happening. He walked calmly and slowly, not spooked at all by the wild foal trailing behind them. Every time Jessica stopped to rest or to check on the baby, the foal would stop too, waiting patiently for her to start moving again. As they got closer to the ranch buildings, Jessica started to worry about what would happen next. She knew the ranch was struggling with money. Times were tough, and they were barely keeping things running as it was. Taking on the care of an orphaned wild foal would be expensive, really expensive. There would be vet bills, special milk formula, and countless hours of care needed. But as she looked down at the little chestnut face looking up at her with such trust, she knew she couldn't turn her back on this baby. Not now. Not ever. When they finally walked through the ranch gates, her boss Tom came out of the main barn to see what all the fuss was about. He was an older man with gray hair and a weathered face that showed he had spent his whole life working outdoors. His mouth fell open when he saw the foal pressed against Jessica's side. "Well, Albie," he said slowly, "where on earth did you find that little one?" Jessica quickly explained everything to Tom while the little foal stayed glued to her side. She told him about riding out to check the fence line, about finding the baby all alone in the field, and about how it had followed her all the way back to the ranch without any hesitation. Tom walked around the foal slowly, examining it with the practiced eye of someone who had spent 50 years working with horses. He ran his weathered hand gently along the foal's back, feeling its ribs. He looked at its teeth, checked its hooves, and studied the way it was standing. The whole time, the baby horse didn't try to pull away or run. It just kept one eye on Jessica, making sure she was still there. "This little one's been alone for a while," Tom said finally, shaking his head. "Maybe 3 or 4 days, judging by how thin she is. It's a filly, by the way. A girl." "What do you think happened to her mother?" Jessica asked, even though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Tom sighed and looked out toward the hills where Jessica had found the foal. "That storm last night was brutal. Could be the mother got injured or killed. Maybe lightning struck near the herd and they scattered, and this little one got separated. Could be a mountain lion got the mare. Hard to say for sure, but one thing I do know is that wild mustangs have been moving through this area lately. I saw tracks just last week up by the north pasture." Jessica felt a wave of sadness wash over her. Somewhere out there, this baby's mother was gone, and this little filly had been wandering around hungry and terrified, calling for a mother who would never come back. The thought made her chest feel tight. The other ranch hands started gathering around to see what was going on. Miguel, the head wrangler, whistled low when he saw the foal. "That's a wild one, isn't it? Look at those markings. Pure Mustang if I ever saw one." "She's beautiful," added Carla, one of the younger workers. "But she's so skinny." "Poor thing." Everyone was talking and asking questions, and Jessica noticed the foal starting to get nervous with all the attention. The baby pressed even closer to her leg, and Jessica instinctively put her hand on the filly's neck, stroking it gently. "All right, everyone back to work," Tom said, waving his hand. "Give the little one some space. She's been through enough without all of us crowding around her." As the others walked away, Tom turned to Jessica with a serious expression on his face. "We need to talk about what happens next." Jessica's stomach dropped. She knew what was coming. "Look, Jessica, I know you've got a good heart. I can see you're already attached to this little filly. But you need to understand the reality of the situation here. The ranch is barely breaking even right now. We've had a rough couple of years and we're watching every penny. I know, but Tom held up his hand. Let me finish. An orphaned foal is going to need round-the-clock care. We're talking about special milk replacer that costs a fortune, vet visits, vaccinations, the time and labor to bottle feed her every few hours, day and night. And that's if everything goes well. If she gets sick, which orphaned foals often do, we're looking at emergency vet bills that could run into the thousands. Jessica felt tears threatening again, but she fought them back. She had to stay strong. She had to make Tom understand. I can call animal control, Tom continued. They'll come pick her up and take her to a rescue facility. They're equipped to handle situations like this. It's probably the best thing for her. The foal chose that exact moment to let out a small, sad whinny and nuzzle against Jessica's hand. It was like the universe was trying to break her heart completely. Please, Jessica said, her voice barely above a whisper. Please don't send her away. I'll take care of her. I'll do everything. Jessica, you're not hearing me. This isn't like adopting a puppy. This is serious business. Do you have any idea how much work this is going to be? I know it won't be easy, but I can do it. I will do it. Tom shook his head. And the money? How are you going to pay for all the supplies and vet care? You make decent wages here, but not enough to cover what this is going to cost. Jessica had been thinking about this during the whole walk back to the ranch. She had some money saved up. Not a lot, but some. She had been putting aside a little bit each month for the past 3 years, saving up to maybe buy her own horse someday. That dream seemed far away and unimportant now compared to the little life depending on her. I have savings, she said, and I'll work extra hours. I'll do whatever it takes. Please, Tom, you saw how she followed me. You saw how she trusts me. I can't just abandon her now. I can't. Tom studied her face for a long moment. Jessica could see him weighing everything in his mind. He was a businessman, but he was also a man who loved horses. She knew he wasn't heartless. Finally, he let out a long breath. All right. Here's what I'll agree to. You can keep her, but this is completely on you. You pay for everything out of your own pocket. Feed, vet bills, supplies, all of it. You take care of her on your own time, and if you can raise her right and train her well, maybe we can use her as a working horse eventually. That way she'd be earning her keep. Deal? Relief flooded through Jessica so fast she felt dizzy. Deal, thank you, Tom, thank you so much. I promise I won't let you down, I hope not. Because I'm going out on a limb here. If this goes sideways, I can't bail you out. You understand that? I understand completely. Tom nodded and then did something that surprised her. He reached out and gently patted the foal's head. Good luck, little one. You picked yourself a stubborn guardian, that's for sure. As Tom walked away, Jessica finally let herself fully accept what she had just agreed to. She looked down at the foal, who was now starting to explore her surroundings a bit more, though she never strayed more than a few feet from Jessica's side. You need a name, Jessica said softly. You can't just be the foal forever. She thought about how she had found this little one after the terrible storm. She thought about how the baby had somehow survived alone against all odds. She thought about the trust in those big brown eyes and the way the filly had chosen to follow her home. Hope, Jessica decided. Your name is Hope, because that's what you are. You're hope that survived the storm, hope that found help when everything seemed lost, hope that tomorrow will be better than today. Hope looked up at her and made a soft sound. Almost like she approved of her new name, Jessica smiled. Even though she felt exhausted and overwhelmed by what she had just committed to, she had no idea what she was really getting herself into. She didn't know about the sleepless nights ahead, or the scary moments when she would think she might lose hope. She didn't know about the financial stress or the physical exhaustion, but she knew one thing for certain. She had made a promise to this little horse, and she was going to keep it no matter what it took. The reality of what Jessica had taken on hit her like a truck by that very evening. After Tom had agreed to let her keep Hope, Jessica had spent the entire afternoon frantically researching what orphaned foals needed to survive. She sat in the ranch office with Tom's old computer, reading article after article, taking notes, and feeling her anxiety grow with each passing minute. The list of supplies she needed was overwhelming. Mare's milk replacer, bottles, feeding equipment, vitamins, a heat lamp in case Hope got cold at night, bedding, and that was just to get started. Then there were the vet visits. Hope would need to be examined right away to make sure she didn't have any serious health problems from her time alone in the wild. Jessica called the local feed store and nearly dropped the phone when she heard how much the mare's milk replacer cost. One bag was $85 and would only last about a week. She quickly did the math in her head. Hope would need to be on milk replacer for at least 3 months, maybe 4. That was over $1,000 just for food, not counting anything else. Her hands shook a little as she checked her bank account on her phone. She had $1,800 saved. That had seemed like a lot of money yesterday. Today, it suddenly seemed like nothing at all. But she had made a promise. She squared her shoulders and drove into town to buy everything Hope needed. At the feed store, the owner, an older woman named Betty, helped her pick out the best supplies. "Orphan Foal, huh?" Betty said kindly. "That's a tough road you're going down, honey. But I'll tell you what, you're doing a good thing. Not everyone would take on that kind of responsibility." Jessica wanted to feel proud, but mostly she just felt terrified. What if she messed this up? What if Hope got sick? What if she couldn't do this after all? When she got back to the ranch, the sun was starting to set. She found Hope right where she had left her, in a small stall in the barn that Miguel had helped her prepare. The little filly whinnied the moment she saw Jessica, and despite all her worries, Jessica couldn't help but smile. "I'm back, baby girl." "I'm back. Did you think I left you?" Hope pushed her nose into Jessica's chest, and Jessica wrapped her arms around the foal's neck. The little horse smelled like hay and that sweet smell that all baby animals seem to have. For just a moment, holding this tiny life in her arms, Jessica felt like maybe everything would be okay. Then came the hard part, getting Hope to take the bottle. Jessica had read that orphaned foals sometimes had trouble accepting artificial bottles because it was so different from nursing naturally. But she had hoped maybe Hope would be so hungry that she would drink anything. Unfortunately, it wasn't that simple. She mixed up the first batch of milk replacer according to the directions on the bag, making sure the temperature was just right. Not too hot, not too cold. She sat down in the stall with Hope and offered the bottle. Hope sniffed it suspiciously. She nudged it with her nose, but she wouldn't drink. "Come on, sweetie," Jessica coaxed. "You need to eat. You're so hungry. Please try." She tried holding the bottle different ways. She tried squirting a little milk on Hope's lips so she could taste how good it was. She tried everything she could think of. Hope just turned her head away again and again. An hour passed. Then 2. Jessica felt panic rising in her chest. If Hope wouldn't eat, she would die. It was that simple and that horrible. Just when Jessica was about to call Tom and ask for help, she tried one more thing. Instead of sitting down, she stood up and held the bottle at an angle, similar to how Hope would have nursed from her mother. And this time, finally, Hope latched on. The relief Jessica felt was so intense she actually started crying. Hope drank the entire bottle, her little tail swishing happily. When she was done, she let out a big sigh and looked more content than Jessica had seen her all day. "Good girl," Jessica whispered. "Such a good, smart girl." That night, Jessica moved a camping cot into the barn.
She had read that orphaned foals needed to be fed every 2 to 3 hours, even through the night.
There was no way she could run back and forth from her cabin to the barn every few hours in the dark. She needed to be right there with Hope. She set an alarm on her phone for 2 in the morning. When it went off, she dragged herself out of bed, still half asleep, and mixed up another bottle. Hope was awake immediately, eager for her meal. After feeding, Jessica checked the filly over carefully, making sure she seemed healthy and comfortable. Then she collapsed back onto the cot. The alarm went off again at 5, then again at 8. By the time the sun came up and the rest of the ranch started waking up, Jessica felt like she had been hit by a train. Every muscle in her body ached and her eyes felt like they had sand in them, but Hope was doing okay. That was all that mattered. Miguel poked his head into the barn around 7. "How'd the first night go?" "I've been up every few hours feeding her. But she's eating well now." "That's good, right?" Miguel smiled sympathetically. "That's real good. You look exhausted, though. You planning to do this every night?" "For as long as she needs it. That's dedication. Respect to you for that." Over the next week, Jessica fell into a routine that consumed her entire life. She would wake up, feed Hope, do her regular ranch work, come back to feed Hope, do more work, feed Hope again, catch a couple hours of sleep, wake up to feed Hope through the night, and repeat. She was constantly tired. Her body ached. Her brain felt foggy from lack of sleep, but Hope was growing. Jessica could see it. The filly's ribs weren't sticking out as much anymore. Her coat was starting to shine. Her eyes looked brighter and more alert. She had more energy, prancing around her stall and exploring everything, with curious enthusiasm. The vet came out at the end of that first week. Dr. Patterson was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had seen just about everything when it came to horses. She examined Hope thoroughly, checking her heart, her lungs, her temperature, her reflexes. Jessica held her breath the entire time, terrified that the vet would find something seriously wrong. Finally, Dr. Patterson straightened up and smiled. "Well, young lady, I don't know how you did it, but this foal is in pretty good shape considering what she's been through. She's underweight, obviously, but she's gaining. Her lungs sound clear, no fever. I don't see any signs of serious illness." Jessica felt like she might cry from relief for the 100th time that week. "So she's going to be okay?" "If you keep doing what you're doing, yes. I'll need to see her again in 2 weeks for vaccinations, and you need to watch her carefully for any signs of respiratory problems. Orphaned foals are vulnerable to pneumonia, but right now she looks good." The vet bill for that visit was $240. Jessica paid it with her credit card, watching her available credit drop. She tried not to think too hard about the math. She would figure it out somehow. That night, as she lay on her cot in the barn listening to Hope's soft breathing from the stall, Jessica allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt since this whole thing started. Pride. She was doing it. Against all odds, she was actually doing it. Just when Jessica thought she was getting the hang of things, everything fell apart in the worst way possible. It happened on a cold morning 3 weeks after she had found Hope. Jessica woke up for the 5 o'clock feeding and immediately knew something was wrong. Hope was lying down in her stall, which wasn't unusual, but she didn't jump up excited for her bottle like she normally did. Instead, she just lay there, her breathing fast and shallow. Her eyes looked dull and tired. Jessica's heart started pounding. She rushed into the stall and knelt down next to the filly. Hope's coat felt hot to the touch. Way too hot, she was running a fever. "No, no, no," Jessica whispered, running her hands over Hope's body, checking for any other signs of what might be wrong. "Come on, baby, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong." Hope tried to lift her head but seemed too weak. She made a small, sad sound that broke Jessica's heart into pieces. Jessica grabbed her phone with shaking hands and called Dr. Patterson. It was barely 5 in the morning, but this was an emergency. The vet answered after 4 rings, her voice thick with sleep. "Dr. Patterson, it's Jessica from Rocky Mountain Ranch. Something's wrong with Hope. She has a fever and she won't get up and her breathing is all wrong." Jessica could hear the vet becoming more alert. "How high is her temperature?" "I don't have a thermometer here, but she's burning up. I can feel it." "Can you hear any rattling in her breathing? Any cough?" Jessica listened carefully. There it was. A slight wheezing sound when Hope breathed out. "Yes, there's something. It sounds like she's struggling." "Okay, stay calm. I'm on my way. In the meantime, try to keep her comfortable. Put some extra blankets on her if you have them, and keep her quiet. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like 20 hours. Jessica sat on the floor of the stall with Hope's head in her lap, stroking the filly's neck and whispering to her over and over. "You're going to be okay. You have to be okay. Please be okay." Miguel showed up for work and found them like that. His face went serious the moment he saw Hope lying there. "That doesn't look good." "Dr. Patterson is on her way," Jessica said, and she was surprised to hear her voice shaking. "She's going to be fine. She has to be fine." Miguel didn't say anything, but the look on his face told Jessica he was worried too. When Dr. Patterson arrived, she worked quickly. She took Hope's temperature and her face became very serious. 104.2, that's high, too high. She listened to Hope's lungs with a stethoscope, moving it to different spots on the filly's chest. Jessica watched her face, trying to read every expression, looking for any sign of hope. "It's pneumonia," Dr. Patterson said finally. "Her lungs are full of fluid. This is what I was afraid might happen. Orphaned foals are so vulnerable to respiratory infections. Can you fix it? Can you make her better?" "I'm going to try, but I need you to understand how serious this is. Pneumonia can kill a foal, especially one as young as Hope. We need to start aggressive treatment right now." For the next hour, Dr. Patterson worked on Hope. She gave her injections of antibiotics. She set up an IV line to get fluids into her. She explained to Jessica that Hope needed antibiotics every 12 hours, and the IV fluids needed to be monitored constantly. "I can hospitalize her at my clinic," Dr. Patterson said. "But honestly, the stress of moving her might make things worse. If you're willing to do the nursing care here, that might be better for her." "I'll do it," Jessica said immediately. "Whatever she needs. Just tell me what to do." Dr. Patterson showed her how to manage the IV, how to keep it clean, how to watch for any problems. She showed her how to give the injections. She explained all the warning signs that would mean Hope was getting worse instead of better. "I'm not going to lie to you," the vet said quietly. "The next 48 hours are critical. If she makes it through that, she has a good chance, but right now it could go either way." After Dr. Patterson left, Jessica just sat there in shock. The vet bill for the emergency visit and all the medications had been $650. Jessica had put it on her credit card without even thinking. Money didn't matter right now. Nothing mattered except Hope. Tom came by around noon. He stood outside the stall, looking at Hope hooked up to her IV, at Jessica sitting there exhausted and scared. "How bad is it?" he asked. "Bad. Really bad. Dr. Patterson said the next 2 days will tell us if she makes it or not." Tom was quiet for a long moment. "Jessica, I know you don't want to hear this right now, but you need to prepare yourself. Sometimes, no matter how hard we try, things don't work out. If this little one doesn't make it, it's not your fault. You've done everything possible." "She's going to make it," Jessica said firmly, even though inside she was terrified. She has to. That night was the longest of Jessica's life. She didn't sleep at all. She sat next to Hope, monitoring her breathing, checking her temperature every hour, making sure the IV was flowing properly. Every time Hope's breathing seemed to get worse, Jessica's panic would spike. Every time the filly shifted or made a sound, Jessica would lean close, talking to her, encouraging her to keep fighting. "You can do this, Hope. I know you can. You survived out there all alone for days. You're strong. You're a fighter. Don't give up now. Please don't give up." Around 3 in the morning, Hope's fever spiked even higher. Jessica called Dr. Patterson in a panic, and the vet talked her through giving Hope additional medication. Jessica's hands were shaking so badly she could barely handle the syringe, but she managed to get it done. "You're doing great," Dr. Patterson said over the phone. "I know you're scared, but you're doing everything right. Just keep monitoring her. Call me if anything changes." By dawn, Jessica was running on nothing but fear and determination. She was beyond exhausted. Her eyes burned. Her back ached from sitting on the hard floor all night. But she didn't care. She wasn't leaving Hope's side. Carla brought her coffee and a sandwich around 7. "You need to eat something. You're no good to Hope if you collapse." Jessica forced herself to eat a few bites and drink some coffee, even though her stomach was in knots. The day dragged on. Hope remained stable but didn't improve. Her fever stayed high. Her breathing stayed labored. Jessica gave her the afternoon dose of antibiotics and prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. That second night was even worse than the first. Around midnight, Hope started coughing. It was a horrible, wet sound that made Jessica want to scream. She called Dr. Patterson again. "That's actually good," the vet said, which seemed insane to Jessica. "It means she's trying to clear her lungs. Keep her head elevated if you can, and keep doing what you're doing." By the morning of the 3rd day, Jessica felt like she was losing her mind from exhaustion and stress. She hadn't really slept in almost 72 hours. She was surviving on coffee and pure stubbornness. Her savings were gone, her credit card was maxed out, and she had no idea how she was going to pay for anything else if Hope needed more treatment. But none of that mattered when, around 9 in the morning, Hope lifted her head on her own for the first time in 2 days. The filly looked at Jessica and made a soft sound, almost like she was saying hello. Jessica burst into tears. The recovery was slow, but it was happening. Every day, Hope got a little bit stronger. First, she could lift her head for longer periods. Then she started showing interest in her bottle again. Then, one beautiful morning about a week after the pneumonia crisis, she stood up on her own. Jessica had been dozing on her cot when she heard the movement. Her eyes flew open to see Hope standing in the middle of her stall, a little wobbly but definitely standing. The filly looked over at Jessica as if to say, "Look what I can do." "Oh my God," Jessica breathed. She slowly got up and walked over, not wanting to startle Hope or make her fall. "Look at you. You're standing. You're really standing." Hope took a few careful steps toward her, and Jessica met her halfway, throwing her arms around the filly's neck. She didn't even try to stop the tears this time. They were good tears. Happy tears. Relief tears. Dr. Patterson came by later that day for a checkup. She listened to Hope's lungs carefully and then stepped back with a smile. "Her lungs are clear. The infection is gone. You did it, Jessica. You saved her." "We saved her," Jessica corrected. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Maybe, but most people would have given up. Most people would have let me take her to the clinic or would have decided it was too much. But you stayed with her every single hour. That kind of dedication, that kind of love, that's what made the difference." After the vet left, Tom came by the barn. He leaned against the stall door and watched Hope munching on some hay, looking much more like a healthy young horse and less like a sick baby. "I underestimated you," Tom said simply. "When you first asked to keep her, I thought you were being naive. I thought you'd realize how hard it was and give up. But you proved me wrong. You've got real grit, Jessica. I just did what needed to be done. No, you did way more than that. You went above and beyond. And look at her now. She's going to make it. She's going to grow up strong because of you." Jessica felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the barn's heater. She had done it. Against all the odds, against all the obstacles, she had saved Hope's life. But she also had to face reality. She was completely broke. Her savings were gone. Her credit card was maxed out. She still owed Dr. Patterson another $200 for the follow-up visits, and Hope would need more vaccinations, more care, more everything as she continued to grow. That night, Jessica sat in the ranch office and looked at her bank statement. She had $43 to her name. Payday wasn't for another week. She had no idea how she was going to buy groceries, let alone pay for Hope's ongoing care. She put her head in her hands, feeling overwhelmed for the first time since Hope had gotten sick. During the crisis, she had been running on adrenaline and determination. Now that Hope was better, reality was crashing down on her. There was a knock on the office door. Miguel poked his head in. "Hey, got a minute?" "Sure, what's up?" Miguel came in and closed the door behind him. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "The crew and I had a talk. We've all been watching you these past few weeks, watching you work yourself to death to save that little horse, and we wanted to help." He handed her the envelope. Jessica opened it and gasped. Inside was over $800 in cash. "Miguel, I can't take this." "Yes, you can. And you will." Everyone gave what they could. Even Tom threw in $100, though he'll deny it if you ask him. "We're a team here. We take care of each other. And right now you need help. So take it." Jessica felt tears welling up again. She seemed to cry more in the past month than she had in her entire life. "I don't know what to say. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Then don't say anything. Just take care of that filly and get some sleep. You look like death warmed over." Over the next few months, things slowly got better. Hope continued to recover and grow stronger every day. She went from needing bottles every few hours to eating solid food. She went from being wobbly to running and playing in her paddock. Her personality started to shine through. Hope was curious about everything. She would investigate any new object in her stall, pushing it around with her nose and sometimes tossing it in the air. She loved people, and would whinny excitedly whenever anyone came near. But her favorite person in the whole world was clearly Jessica. The bond between them was obvious to everyone on the ranch. Wherever Jessica went, Hope wanted to follow. When Jessica mucked out other stalls, Hope would hang her head over her own stall door and watch. When Jessica worked in the paddock, Hope would trot along beside her. At night, when Jessica finally moved back to her own cabin, Hope would call for her until she fell asleep. "That horse thinks you're her mother," Carla observed one day, watching Hope follow Jessica around like a shadow. "I guess I kind of am," Jessica said, and the truth of that statement hit her hard. She hadn't just saved Hope's life. She had become the most important thing in Hope's world. That was a huge responsibility, but also an incredible gift. As spring arrived, Hope was 6 months old and growing fast. She was no longer the tiny, fragile foal Jessica had found in that field. She was becoming a strong, healthy young horse. Her chestnut coat gleamed in the sunlight. Her white star stood out bright and beautiful on her forehead, and her spirit was unbreakable. Other ranchers started to notice Hope. Word had spread about the orphaned wild foal that Jessica had saved, and people would stop by just to see her. Everyone agreed that Hope was special, not just because of her story, but because of who she was becoming. "She's got good conformation," one older rancher told Jessica. "Nice straight legs, good chest, strong hindquarters. You raise her right, and she'll make a fine working horse." Tom overheard this and smiled at Jessica. "Looks like your investment might pay off after all." Jessica hadn't thought of Hope as an investment. She had thought of her as a life that needed saving. But she understood what Tom meant. If Hope could become a working horse, she would be contributing to the ranch. She would be earning her keep, just like Tom had stipulated when he agreed to let Jessica keep her. Jessica started doing gentle training with Hope. Nothing intense, just basic groundwork. Teaching her to lead properly. Teaching her to stand still. Teaching her to pick up her hooves for cleaning. Hope was incredibly smart and learned fast. She seemed to enjoy the training sessions, treating them like games. "She's a natural," Miguel said, watching one of their training sessions. "Some horses fight every step of the way, but this one wants to please you. That's a rare quality." By the time Hope was 9 months old, Jessica had paid off her credit card debt. She had started saving again, though not as much as before. She had also started sleeping in her own cabin full-time, though she still checked on Hope multiple times during the night. Life had found a new normal, a better normal. Jessica had proven to herself that she could handle more than she ever thought possible. She had learned that she was stronger than she knew, and she had gained a companion who would change her life forever, but the real tests were still ahead. Training a horse was one thing. Training a wild Mustang who had survived trauma was something else entirely, and Jessica was about to learn just how challenging that could be. Hope turned 2 years old on a warm spring morning. Jessica had to estimate the date since she didn't know exactly when Hope had been born. But Dr. Patterson had given her a rough timeline based on Hope's development when she first examined her. So Jessica had picked a date in early April and declared it Hope's birthday. The ranch hands all brought treats. Carla brought apples. Miguel brought carrots. Even Tom showed up with a bucket of special grain mix. Hope enjoyed all the attention, munching happily on her treats and letting everyone pet her. But Jessica knew what this birthday really meant. It was time to start serious training. Time to see if Hope could become the working horse that would justify all the time, money, and effort Jessica had invested. Time to see if Hope could handle having a saddle and eventually a rider. Jessica had been preparing for this for months. She had read every book she could find about training horses. She had watched countless videos online. She had talked to every experienced horse trainer she could find. But reading about it and actually doing it were two very different things. She started slowly, just like all the experts recommended. First, she introduced Hope to the saddle pad, just laying it gently across Hope's back and letting her get used to the weight and feeling of it. Hope was curious but not scared. She sniffed at the pad and then went back to eating hay like it was no big deal. "Good girl," Jessica praised her. "That's my brave girl." Over the next week, Jessica gradually increased what Hope had to accept. The saddle pad became a light saddle without any straps tightened. Then the saddle with the girth loosely fastened, then a little tighter. Hope handled everything calmly, trusting Jessica completely. Miguel watched their progress with approval. "You're doing this right. Taking your time. Building trust. That's the way it should be done." After 2 weeks, Jessica felt confident enough to try the bridle. She had practiced this moment in her mind 100 times. She approached Hope with the bridle held low, letting Hope see it and smell it. Then, speaking softly and moving slowly, she slipped it over Hope's ears and gently guided the bit into her mouth. Hope accepted it without any fuss. Jessica nearly cried with relief. So far, everything was going perfectly. Maybe she had been worried for nothing. Maybe this would be easier than she thought. She should have known better. The problem started when it was time for Jessica to actually get on Hope's back. Not ride, not yet. Just mounting. Just putting weight in the stirrup and pulling herself up. She had practiced this too, leaning across Hope's back, putting weight on one side, getting Hope used to the feeling of someone being above her. Hope had seemed fine with all of that. But when Jessica actually swung her leg over and sat in the saddle for the first time, something in Hope snapped. The filly exploded. Hope bucked hard, throwing her whole body into the air. Jessica felt herself flying before she even realized what was happening. She hit the ground hard, all the air rushing out of her lungs. Pain shot through her left side where she landed on her shoulder. She lay there for a second, stunned and trying to breathe. When she finally managed to suck in some air, she looked up to see Hope standing a few feet away, her eyes wide and wild, her whole body trembling. Miguel ran into the paddock. "Are you okay? Can you move?" Jessica slowly sat up, testing her limbs. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed broken. "I'm okay. I think I'm okay." What the hell happened? She was doing so well. I don't know. I thought she was ready. Tom and Carla had heard the commotion and came running. Tom helped Jessica to her feet while Carla tried to approach Hope, but the filly backed away. "Still looking scared and wild. Let me see your shoulder," Tom said, his face concerned. Jessica rotated her arm, wincing at the pain. "It's just bruised. I'll be fine. You need to see a doctor. That could be more serious than you think." "I said I'm fine," Jessica snapped, and then immediately felt bad. "I'm sorry. I just need a minute." She walked slowly toward Hope, who was now standing in the corner of the paddock, her head high and her nostrils flared. "It's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm not mad." But Hope wouldn't let Jessica get close. Every time Jessica took a step forward, Hope took a step back. The trust that had been building between them for 2 years suddenly seemed fragile and broken. That night, Jessica sat in her cabin with an ice pack on her shoulder and her mind racing. What had gone wrong? She had done everything right. She had been patient. She had moved slowly. She had built trust. So why had Hope reacted that way? Unable to sleep, Jessica grabbed her laptop and started researching again. She read article after article about training young horses, about trauma responses, about fear reactions, and slowly a picture started to form in her mind. Hope wasn't just any young horse. She was a wild Mustang who had been orphaned as a tiny foal. She had spent days alone and terrified before Jessica found her. Then she had nearly died from pneumonia, spending days feeling weak and helpless. All of that trauma was still inside her, buried under the surface. Jessica had been so focused on doing the training steps correctly that she had forgotten about Hope's emotional scars. When Hope felt someone on her back, sitting above her, controlling her, she must have felt trapped, helpless, scared. All those old fears had come rushing back. Jessica felt terrible. She had triggered Hope's trauma without meaning to. She had pushed too hard, too fast, even though she thought she was being patient. The next morning, despite the pain in her shoulder, Jessica went back to the paddock. Hope was standing in the far corner, looking wary. It took 20 minutes of patient waiting before Hope would even come close enough for Jessica to touch her. "I'm sorry," Jessica whispered, stroking Hope's neck. "I'm so sorry. I should have understood. I should have been more careful with your feelings." Hope pressed her nose against Jessica's chest, and Jessica knew they would be okay eventually. But they had a lot of work to do to rebuild what had been lost. Over the next few days, Jessica consulted with Dr. Patterson, who recommended a specialized horse trainer who worked with traumatized animals. The trainer's name was Linda Chen, and she ran a small operation about 40 miles away. Jessica called her and explained the situation. Linda listened carefully and then said something that Jessica really needed to hear. "You didn't fail. You did everything technically right. But horses who have been through trauma need a different approach. They need to feel like they have control and choice. They need to feel safe, not just physically, but emotionally. I can help you learn how to give Hope that." Linda agreed to come to the ranch for a consultation. When she arrived 2 days later, she spent the first hour just watching Hope. Not trying to touch her, not trying to train her. Just observing how Hope moved, how she reacted to things, how she held her body. "She's terrified of being trapped," Linda said finally. "Look at how she positions herself. She always keeps an exit route open. She never lets herself get cornered. That's trauma behavior. She learned very young that being trapped means death." "So what do I do?" "We rebuild her trust, but this time we do it differently. We make sure Hope always feels like she has a choice. We never force her. We invite her to participate, and if she says no, we respect that. It's going to take longer this way, but it's the only way that will really work." Jessica nodded, feeling both hopeful and daunted. "How much longer are we talking about?" Linda smiled gently. "With horses like Hope? Could be months. Could be a year. But trust me, it's worth the wait." Linda came to the ranch twice a week for the next 3 months. Each session, she showed Jessica new techniques that were completely different from traditional horse training. Instead of making Hope do things, they invited her to try. Instead of punishment for refusing, they simply stepped back and tried again later. Instead of forcing submission, they built partnership. The first big lesson was teaching Hope that she could say no. That sounds crazy when you're trying to train an animal, but Linda explained that horses who have been traumatized need to know they have some control over what happens to them. "Watch this," Linda said during one session. She approached Hope with a rope halter. Instead of just putting it on, she held it up and waited. Hope sniffed it and then turned her head away. Instead of forcing it on anyway, Linda simply lowered the halter and walked away. "You just let her refuse?" Jessica asked, confused. "I'm teaching her that her choices matter. Watch what happens next." Sure enough, after a few minutes, Hope walked over to Linda on her own and lowered her head toward the halter. This time, when Linda raised it, Hope accepted it willingly. See? When she knows she can say no, she's much more willing to say yes, because it's her choice, not something being forced on her. Jessica started applying this technique to everything. When it was time for grooming, she would hold up the brush and wait for Hope to agree. When it was time for hoof care, she would touch Hope's leg and wait for Hope to lift it on her own. It took longer than just making Hope do things, but the results were incredible. Hope became more relaxed, more confident. The wild, scared look started to disappear from her eyes. She began to trust again, not just Jessica, but the process itself. The saddle was still a problem, though. Every time Jessica brought it near, Hope would tense up. Her whole body would go rigid, and she would start breathing faster. The memory of that scary moment when she had bucked Jessica off was still fresh in her mind. Linda worked on this carefully. First, they just let the saddle sit in Hope's paddock where she could see it every day. Not on her back, just nearby. Hope would walk past it, sniff it, eventually even rub against it when it was just sitting there. Then Linda had Jessica do something that seemed strange. She had Jessica sit in the saddle while it was on the ground, just sitting there reading a book or looking at her phone. Hope would come over and investigate, realizing that the saddle wasn't a threat when it was just sitting there with Jessica in it. "We're separating the saddle from the scary feelings," Linda explained. "We're making it just another object in her environment, not something that means danger." After weeks of this desensitization, Linda suggested they try putting the saddle on Hope's back again. Jessica was nervous, remembering how badly the last attempt had gone. Her shoulders still ached sometimes when the weather changed, but this time they did it differently. Jessica placed the saddle on Hope's back very gently, then immediately took it off. Just a second of wait, then freedom. Hope tensed but didn't panic. They did this over and over, gradually increasing the time the saddle stayed on. 1 second, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 30 seconds. Hope learned that the saddle on her back didn't mean she was trapped. It meant nothing bad would happen. It was just a thing, and then it would go away, and she was still safe. The real breakthrough came on a warm afternoon in July. Jessica had been working with Hope for almost 6 months since that first failed attempt at mounting. Linda had told her she would know when Hope was ready. She would feel it. And that day, Jessica felt it. Hope was standing calmly with the saddle on, completely relaxed. Jessica approached with the mounting block, and instead of tensing up, Hope just looked at her with those calm, trusting eyes. Jessica stepped onto the block. She put her hand on the saddle. Hope didn't move. Slowly, carefully, Jessica put her foot in the stirrup. She added her weight gradually, watching Hope's reaction. The mare stood perfectly still. Jessica shifted more weight, leaning across the saddle. Still nothing. Hope just stood there, calm and patient. Jessica's heart was pounding, but she kept her movements smooth and gentle. She swung her leg over and sat in the saddle. Hope didn't buck. She didn't panic. She just turned her head slightly as if to say, "Oh, we're doing this now." "Okay." Jessica sat there for about 30 seconds, not trying to make Hope move, just sitting, just being together in this new way. Tears were running down her face, but she was smiling so big her cheeks hurt. Good girl, she whispered. Such a good, brave girl. I'm so proud of you. Linda was watching from outside the paddock and she was smiling too. That's how it's supposed to look. That's trust. Over the next few weeks, Jessica and Hope took tiny steps forward. Sitting in the saddle became walking a few steps. Walking became trotting. Each new thing was introduced slowly, with Hope having the choice to participate. And each time, Hope chose to say yes. By the end of summer, Jessica was riding Hope regularly. Not long trail rides yet, just around the ranch property. But it was real riding. Hope responded to Jessica's cues. She seemed to enjoy the work. She would whinny when she saw Jessica coming with the saddle, actually excited about their sessions together. The other ranch hands were amazed by the transformation. Miguel watched them ride past one day and shook his head in wonder. I've been working with horses my whole life, and I've never seen anything like this. The bond you two have is something special. Tom was impressed too, though he tried to hide it behind his usual gruff manner. But Jessica noticed he had started bringing Hope carrots every morning, and she had overheard him telling a visiting rancher about our Jessica and her miracle horse. As fall approached, Hope was 3.5 years old. She was fully grown, now a beautiful chestnut mare with a white star and a spirit that was somehow both wild and gentle. She had become a skilled riding horse, responsive and reliable. But more than that, she had taught Jessica lessons that went way beyond horse training. She had taught Jessica about patience, about trust, about how healing from trauma takes time and understanding, about how the strongest bonds are built slowly, with respect and love. One evening, as Jessica was brushing Hope down after a ride, she thought about that foggy morning years ago when she had found a terrified, starving foal standing alone in a field. She thought about all the sleepless nights, the maxed-out credit cards, the moments of doubt and fear. She thought about the pneumonia that almost killed Hope, and the training accident that almost broke their bond. Every single moment of struggle had been worth it. You changed my life, Jessica told Hope quietly. You know that? I saved you, but you saved me too. You taught me what I'm capable of. You taught me what real love looks like. Hope huffed softly and nuzzled Jessica's pocket, looking for treats. Jessica laughed and pulled out an apple slice. Some things never changed. Hope would always be food motivated. But as Jessica watched Hope crunch happily on her apple, she felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. They had made it. Together, they had overcome every obstacle. They had built something beautiful and strong, and their story wasn't over yet. In fact, Jessica had a feeling the best part was still to come. 2 years had passed since that breakthrough moment in the saddle. Hope was now 5 years old and had become one of the best working horses on the ranch. She was gentle with beginners but responsive enough for experienced riders. She had a calm temperament that made her perfect for checking fence lines or moving cattle. Everyone loved her. Jessica had been promoted to head trainer at the ranch, partly because of her success with Hope. Tom had seen what she could do with a seemingly impossible case, and he wanted her to bring that same patience and skill to training other horses. Jessica loved her new role, but Hope would always be special. Hope would always be hers. On a bright morning in early May, Jessica decided to ride Hope along the same path where she had first found her all those years ago. She did this sometimes, retracing that journey, remembering how far they had both come. It felt like visiting a sacred place, the spot where both their lives had changed forever. The weather was perfect. The sky was clear blue and wildflowers were blooming everywhere. Hope moved smoothly beneath her, ears forward, enjoying the ride. They rode past the fence line where Jessica used to check for storm damage. They rode through the tall grass where that tiny, scared foal had been standing alone. Jessica felt emotional, like she always did when she came to this spot. She dismounted and just stood there for a moment, remembering. Hope grazed peacefully nearby, completely at ease. That's when Hope suddenly lifted her head, her ears pricked forward in that alert way that meant she had noticed something important. Jessica followed her gaze and saw movement on a hill about half a mile away. Horses. Wild horses. A small herd of mustangs grazing on the hillside. Jessica's heart started beating faster. She had seen wild horses in this area before, but never this close. She stood very still, not wanting to spook them. Hope was staring at the herd intently, Her whole body focused on them. Then Hope did something Jessica had never heard before. She let out a very specific call. It wasn't her usual whinny that she used to greet Jessica or the other ranch horses. This was different. Higher pitched, more urgent, almost desperate. And from the herd on the hillside, one horse answered with the exact same call. Jessica felt chills run down her entire body. She knew. Somehow she just knew. A chestnut mare separated from the herd and started walking toward them. She moved slowly, cautiously, but she kept coming. As she got closer, Jessica could see that she had similar markings to Hope. The same rich color, the same build, and on her forehead, a white marking that looked almost identical to Hope's star. "Oh my God," Jessica whispered. "It's your mother. Hope, that's your mother." Hope was trembling beside her, making small sounds of distress or excitement, or maybe both. The mare kept coming, calling to Hope again. That same distinctive call that they both seemed to understand. Jessica knew what she had to do, even though it broke her heart. She reached up and unbuckled Hope's bridle, slipping it off completely. She had to give Hope a choice. After everything they had been through together, after all the work they had done on trust and choice and partnership, Jessica had to let Hope decide. "You can go," Jessica said, her voice shaking. "If you want to go with her, you can go. I won't stop you." For a moment, nothing happened. Hope stood there, free of all tack, with the wild herd visible in the distance and her mother calling to her. Jessica held her breath, tears already starting to fall. Then Hope took off running. Jessica watched her go, galloping across the field toward the mare. Her vision blurred with tears, but she could see the moment when Hope reached her mother. The two horses touched noses, necks intertwining, making sounds that were almost like crying. They were remembering. They were recognizing. They were reuniting after 5 long years apart. Jessica sank down to her knees in the grass, watching them. She was crying so hard she could barely see, but she didn't look away. This was Hope's moment, Hope's choice. And if Hope chose to return to the wild, to be with her real family, Jessica would have to accept it. She thought about all the nights she had stayed up feeding Hope as a baby, all the money she had spent, all the fear during the pneumonia, all the patient hours of training. Had all of that been just to get Hope healthy enough to leave? Was she about to lose the most important relationship in her life? Hope and the mare spent several minutes together. They walked in circles around each other. They touched constantly, as if making sure the other one was real. The mare smelled Hope all over, as if checking to make sure her baby was really okay. Hope did the same to her mother. Then Hope turned and looked back at Jessica. Their eyes met across the distance. Hope looked at her mother, then back at Jessica, then at her mother again. Jessica could see Hope trying to make a decision, trying to figure out where she belonged. "It's okay," Jessica called out, her voice cracking. "I love you. Whatever you choose, I love you." The mare started walking back toward her herd, clearly expecting Hope to follow. She called to Hope again, that mother's call that must have been the last thing Hope heard before they were separated all those years ago. Hope took a few steps toward her mother, then stopped. She looked back at Jessica again. Then slowly, Hope turned around completely and started walking back toward Jessica. Not running this time, just walking. Calm and purposeful, making a choice. The mare stopped and watched her daughter walk away. She called one more time, a sound that was both an invitation and a goodbye. Hope paused for just a moment, acknowledging her mother, but she didn't turn back. She kept walking toward Jessica. When Hope reached her, she pressed her forehead against Jessica's chest, right where she used to do as a tiny foal. Jessica wrapped her arms around Hope's neck and sobbed. "You chose me," Jessica whispered. "You chose me." They stood like that for a long time. Eventually, Jessica looked up and saw that the mare was still standing there, watching. The wild horse didn't look angry or sad. She just looked like a mother who had seen her child one last time, and knew that her child was safe, that her child was loved, that her child was happy. Then the mare turned and walked back to her herd. She joined the other horses, and together they moved over the hill and out of sight. Jessica stroked Hope's neck, still crying, but now they were tears of gratitude and joy. "Thank you for choosing this life, for choosing us, for choosing me." She put Hope's bridle back on and they started the ride back to the ranch, but everything felt different now. Before, there had always been a tiny part of Jessica that wondered if she had done the right thing by taking Hope in. If maybe Hope would have been better off being rescued by professionals and released back to the wild. Now she knew. Hope had been given the choice. Real freedom, her birth family, the wildlife she was born to, and she had chosen to stay with Jessica. Not because she was trapped or because she didn't know any better, but because she wanted to. When they got back to the ranch, Tom was waiting by the barn. He took one look at Jessica's tear-streaked face and raised his eyebrows. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Jessica said, smiling through her tears. "Everything's absolutely perfect." That night, as Jessica checked on Hope one last time before bed, the mare was lying down peacefully in her stall. When she saw Jessica, she nickered softly in greeting, just like she did every night. Jessica sat down in the straw beside her like she used to do when Hope was a sick baby. She ran her hand along Hope's neck, feeling the strong muscles and the steady breathing. "We found each other that foggy morning," Jessica said softly, "and today we chose each other. That's even more special, isn't it? We both had the chance to walk away, but we stayed. That's real love. That's real family. Not about who gave birth to you or who you're supposed to be with. It's about who you choose. And I'm so grateful you chose me, just like I chose you all those years ago." Hope sighed contentedly and closed her eyes. Jessica stayed there a while longer, feeling at peace in a way she had never quite felt before. Their story had come full circle. The scared, abandoned foal and the determined young woman who saved her had both found what they were looking for. They had found home. They had found family. They had found each other, and that was worth everything.